Hello, everybody. We're just about getting ready to go here. We're going to wait just 2 more minutes to let people trickle in. So give us just 2 more minutes and we will get started here talking about B2B in the digital age, digital versus human. So 2 more minutes. All right. Boy, am I excited to get going today. Let's kick this off. We'll have a few stragglers coming in, so let me handle some of the housekeeping items as we have a few other people join. Today, we're going to be talking about winning in B2B, the digital age of digital versus human. I'm Gabe Larson. I'll be hosting today's webinar. I'm the Vice President of Growth here at InsideSales.com. The leader of providing sales acceleration technology infused with artificial intelligence to help people sell more. I'm going to introduce our guest here in just a minute, but I want to make sure this is interactive. We have a couple hundred people on the webinar. We want to make this more about you than it is about us. And to do that, I want you to get used to using the Q&A box and also the chat tool down below. So if you can, and I'm going to do it just as an example here, I want you to go to the chat tool and tell me your name and where you're from. So I'm Gabe Larson. I'm from SLC. So you can see that. I just threw that in the chat box there on the right-hand side. You can also use the Q&A. Perfect. Yep, we got Kathy, Rob, fantastic, Fazian, Katie, Jim, Laura, Tobias, Herb. Oh, yeah, there you go. Perfect. Wow. Look at that. Candace, everybody can use. Oh, Dawn is back. Dawn, glad to have you on again. Dawn's become a little bit of a regular. Jim, Brianna, Heather, perfect. Guys, use that chat box. Ask questions. We want this to be about you. A couple of people using the Q&A box already. Feel free to use that as well. Let's get going. A couple of people already asked me, will this be available after? Yes, Dawn, you will have this recording in your inbox tomorrow morning if you do have to go, but know that we'll be probably fairly short today, just around 30 minutes. So with that, I want to make sure I introduce our guest today. Coming from McKinsey Company, we have Candace Lun Plotkin, who is the Director of Knowledge at McKinsey Company. Candace, thanks so much for joining, and how the heck are you?
I'm great. Gabe, thank you for having me, and thank you for everyone for tuning in. Just by way of quick introductions, I'm Candace Lun Plotkin. I am broadcasting to you from McKinsey's Boston office. It's a little bit of a rainy day as I look out the window. I'm here to talk to you about something I'm very excited about. I've been at McKinsey a little over 20 years. I worked at Procter & Gamble before that, and I had a brief stint as a chief marketing and sales officer for a small tech startup. I spend the better part of my days, I would say 70% of my time, serving clients, all B2B clients from industrial to high tech. And then I spend the remaining 30% of my time helping to drive research and get a better understanding of what is happening with companies and the marketplace. in B2B. So that's what I'm here to talk to you about.
Perfect. And that's going to be this talk track, you guys. Candace and I went back and forth deciding on the best talk track to go over today. Her experience, her knowledge around blending this digital with human interactions and sales, I just felt like would be perfect for the audience. And we had almost just about 400 people sign up for the webinar. We have a couple hundred already, so I think the topic was the right one. Candace, I want to turn it over to you. I may interrupt with some questions, but let's dive in and talk about this digital and human touch and how it can be effective in sales.
Great. So let's get right into it. I'm going to talk about a few things today, but I want to start out with just a question. A CEO said to me recently, he said, I know the answer is digital. I'm just not sure what the question is. And, I would say two of the most common questions that we've heard at McKinsey with respect to sales strategy are the following. So the first is, what's different about what B2B buyers expect from their suppliers and all the interactions they have with them? What's different about them versus in the consumer world? And then I think the second question that we usually get is, where exactly should I place my digital bets, right? How does that impact my human sales force? And then I would also add the question for those of us who are interested in inside sales, and personally I think everyone should be, what does this mean for inside sales, right? Yeah. So if you look at digital versus human, what counts as human, right? Does it have to be a salesperson standing in front of you? And so what I wanted to do today is just talk about three things, right? One, talk a little bit about the B2B selling landscape, a little bit about what customers care about and specifically how they care to interact and how they care to buy, and then just a couple examples of success. So as we think about the B2B sales landscape, selling has really become increasingly complex, and the role of inside sales has evolved, right? So if you think about kind of what I call era zero, that was mono-channel. That was one face-to-face sales force selling to everybody. And then you move into multiple channels, right? And this was typically different customers that were segmented by size or value, and you had a face-to-face sales force that served the larger ones and inside sales maybe for the smaller ones. When you get into multi-channel, you've got a much more complex segmentation, right? So you get into, segmenting customers by profit pools, by needs, by opportunities, and you would leverage a whole portfolio of channels, which almost always would include inside sales, sometimes online sales, sometimes distribution. Then you really get into the era that we're in now, which is multi-touch. Right? And here you're doing the same thing as in multi-channel, but what is different about it is you're actually making accommodations and segments based on where you are in the customer decision journey. The key question here is, how should the sales force, whatever sales force that is, how should they be interacting with the customers at which stage of the journey? And more critically, right, you have to understand, what do customers want? How is that evolving? Where do they want a human touch? Where can you use something that's more self-serve? I think of particular interest is, where could inside sales play? And in particular, if inside sales are providing expert advice via web chat, does that still count? Does it not count? So we'll get into that. To help answer some of these questions, we did some research and we asked 1,000 B2B purchasers across industries. And we wanted to know, how are B2B buyers' preferences shifting, right? You hear a lot in the consumer world, a little bit less on the B2B side. And then the second question was really, where should you focus your live sales resources? Where can you offer digital? Where does it make sense? Where does it not? And then, of course, how can we help all of our sales teams improve their conversion rates? And so if you want, just a quick summary of the answer to the research, I think this chart sums it up best, right? And the answer is that buyers want humans and they want digital, right? There are very few, if you look at the left side, kind of the blue column, of folks who are very traditional who only want a face-to-face salesperson. If you go to the right side and you look more at the black, you'll also see there are very, very few who only want digital interactions. The vast majority, regardless of the size of company, regardless of the size or the scale of what they're buying, almost everybody would like some combination of digital and traditional, right? And so when we say traditional, That means face-to-face, it means inside sales, it may even mean web chat if you're being a little bit generous and liberal with it. But the idea is you need both. And just getting a little bit more specific, right? So what we would say is that buyers start their journeys wanting human-to-human contact, and they end wanting digital contact. So the way to read this chart on the left-hand side, right, this is the percent of buyers who want to speak to a person instead of using a digital interface, right? So 81%, if you look on the left side, if you're completely buying a new product and service, they want to talk to a human, right? If you are kind of a traditionalist. If you are a middle of the road sort of person, 80% of buyers would like to talk to a human, and then 67% of the more digitally advanced. Now, you see that shift a lot if you look at I want to buy the same thing I bought before, but I have some slightly new or different specifications. And you see a drop of almost 30 points when you hit that area. And then I think the punchline of this slide basically says, look, if I'm repurchasing, same product, same specs, roughly only 15% actually want to talk to a human. 85% would prefer to interact in a digital way and do some kind of self-service. Now, the nuance here, of course, is they want to know that there are a team of very smart humans behind that. And we can talk a little bit more about what that means, but you basically see that there's some pretty interesting things that are happening, and we see a lot of this in the consumer world.
Yeah, Candace, a couple of questions coming in here that might be fitting.
Sure.
One from Hugh that I think kind of sets that stage. A lot of research out there talking about large majority of buyers make decisions before engaging with a human.
Yes.
You know, the 60 to 70% of decision is made via digital channels.
Yeah.
I know you've got a little more in here about that, but just at a high level, do you feel like that is kind of a true statistic? Because there has been debates that sometimes that is not, you know, it's maybe not as true as people think.
So I think with all things in the complex world we live in, there is a lot of nuance at play here. And what we do find is, yes, it is true that many decisions are made prior to the actual sale or prior to the human interaction. So if you're really talking about being aware of the options at hand, there is a ton of research that's being online through talking to people. And other ways of gathering information. But what we do find is if you're talking about a new product and new specifications, there's a huge opportunity for the human touch to play and for humans to have opportunities to influence where and what people want to buy, and even more importantly, like what goes into the potential decision set.
Interesting.
So there's a big opportunity at the front end of the decision journey to influence what people consider to be part of their solution set and what they may end up buying, right? We all know if you miss out at the beginning, it's very hard to get in later. Yeah,
interesting. No, great question, Hugh. Couple more, Candace. I want to see if we can get to
sure.
Just a little more on the report, 3 or 4 questions, but one that came in that just said, hey, I'm wondering if this does apply to kind of a B2B services or consulting sales, or is it more of a specific type of industry? Any kind of, do you believe that the findings on the last page that you showed were, do you feel like that's pretty general for kind of multiple industries, or do you feel like it does just apply to kind of here or there?
Yeah, I feel like whoever asked that question just wants to see my next slide. So let me answer the question and get to the next slide at the same time. So the industries that we surveyed, right? So let me back up, right? In answer to the question, we actually find across industries, this is generally true. And this surprised us, in fact, so much that we had our team check the numbers 3 or 4 times to make sure we hadn't made a mistake somewhere. And so when we say there's somewhat similar results across industries, right? What we have displayed here. So the first row is energy, materials, industrials. The second row is tech, media, and telecom. The third row here is advanced industries like auto and assembly, semiconductor. The fourth row are financial institutions. And the fifth would be consumer, more on the B2B2C side. Now, what you'll see missing here are services. We do have data from services, right? Business services. The sample size we had from that was relatively smaller. So we didn't publish that data, but we did see directionally the data look similar, right? And to sum up, it basically says beginning of the journey, new product, new specs. I would rather talk to a person, right? That's 70 or 80% of people.
Wow.
Right? Same
Wow.
product, different specifications. I get myself into the 40s and 50s for wanting to talk to a human. Now I'm buying the exact same product, same specs. Look at 15% want to talk to a human. And then the far right-hand side of the chart basically says, I really just always want to do digital.
Yeah.
And you see those numbers are small, right? Which leads us to this conclusion that says humans still matter a lot. We would not be saying this is death of the salesperson at all.
Yeah, guys, I a lot of I would like to just ask if you can throw it in the chat. I mean, are a lot of people surprised about this, that the human is still very important in B2B sales? Candace, it looks like kind of across the board, because we're getting more. I've got probably 10 questions, one from Don, one from Rob, saying, look, how did we segment it by age and industry, et cetera? But it does, generally speaking, that the human is still very important in the never purchase category in B2B sales across the board. That's pretty true, right?
Yes, that is true. And I think where there's an important set of insights is around the spot in the decision journey that you're in, right? So front end, where you're trying to get more information and you need more expertise, we need humans.
Yeah.
Back end, where I want to be able to do a simple reorder, same product, same specs, we would like the humans to get out of our way, provided that the platform is easy to use and I can get what I want. And in fact, that is true. We looked at cuts of data for small products versus large products, huge capital goods, things like that. You still see reorders. The vast majority of people would rather not talk to a human being if there is a good platform to order from.
It's a good point, and a couple good questions actually. Rob, let me get this one. Sorry, Candace, I promise we'll continue on, but
okay.
there are some surprised people here that the human interaction is that high. When you're referencing human interaction, are we referencing face-to-face or just telephone or both, or what how do you define human interaction here?
Yeah, so we asked the question around human interaction, right? We have a clear, based on the questions we've been getting since we did the research, and the questions we're getting today, I think are going this direction, is, the next round of research that we do, which we're launching, within weeks, is to really tease out inside sales versus face-to-face. And I would throw in their web chat also.
Yeah.
So, we have directional indications that either could work if it's high quality. What we don't yet have for you are the specifics around exactly what situation you would want to have a real live person sitting in your office versus when is somebody super smart who's a great salesperson on the phone, when would that be fine? Our hypothesis would be there are many more opportunities to do inside sales than companies are taking advantage of, provided they've got the right salesperson and it's a real salesperson versus somebody who's just an order taker or a customer service agent. Those guys are important too, make no mistake. But I think that the implication, or at least our hypothesis, will be, and we'll hopefully prove this out as soon as we get the results back.
I like that. Candace, do you feel like this is a trend that has changed over the past few years, or do you see it changing? Meaning, Amazon's done a lot. There's a great question from CL here. Where we're seeing more digital buying experiences and that kind of merging itself into B2B, but do you feel like it's going a different direction?
We are seeing many more digital experiences. We are seeing much more openness across industries for buyers to buy digitally. We're seeing, I would say, a whole-scale consumerization of business buying, where experiences that you have on the consumer side of the world impact what your expectations are on the business side. So I think that's why we say this is the world of and, right? So companies need to be great on the digital side where it counts, and they need to be great on the human side where it counts. So I think that things become even more complicated for business manufacturers and suppliers. And services I would throw in there as well, although we have currently less data on services.
Got it. Interesting. Okay. Yeah, please continue.
Okay, so just to give you a little bit more detail, we talked about how there are a lot of similarities across industries, and I think what we see is it holds true across the buyer's decision journey, right? Buyers want people, they want digital, they just want them in different spots and times. And so the trick is, how do you figure that out? And this is crucial to answer as you think about your sales resources. And you want to be able to sell in a way that is cost effective, that drives growth and doesn't waste time and money. So just quickly here, what you'll see is, right, what typically triggers a new purchase, right? So if you look at kind of lower left-hand side of this screen, what triggers a new purchase is usually a person, and it's usually somebody internal to the customer's organization, right? It's not the email prompt or the call from the rep, surprisingly, right? What this means for the rep is they need pervasive and very personal relationships across the organization in order to cover their bases, right? As you go more towards the top of the chart, when you look at kind of research and the consider and evaluate stage, buyers want easy to find digital information, right? How quickly can they get to your e-catalog if you have one? Is there a good comparison engine that they can quickly access that will show them different pricing options, what features they can add? Can they compare and contrast both versus what you have and perhaps even versus what competitors offer, right? Can they get the answer they want very quickly without having to give up a lot of information, right? We've all seen these pop-up boxes that say, like, tell me more about yourself, right? Which can be incredibly annoying when you just want information. And then also, can the customers get an answer quickly if they want to call somebody, right? Can they get a quick and accurate answer? Accurate is really important, and we'll get more into that in a minute. And then as you move over into kind of the buying and the post-sales service and loyalty phases, customers tell us that, most of the actual buying happens with a rep involved, right? Half of them, however, say they would switch to digital if it worked well. So some interesting insight there. And many would like for repurchase digital options only, right? We said only 15% really feel they need to talk to a person at that stage.
Mm-hmm.
But again, if that's the case, where is the backup team of people who can very quickly and accurately and in an expert way add some value and answer questions? And then you're talking about upsell, cross-sell here too. And so there may be opportunities both human and digital.
Yeah. Do you feel like, Candace, again, a couple of people asking just very specific to their area of expertise, but in healthcare,
Yep.
Ben mentions we've got a lot of physicians who are saying they still want fax contracts and paper invoices.
Yep. Yes.
Do you still see a lot of differences in, just one industry versus another on some of these pieces?
Yeah. So I think across the board, the trends are similar. Now, you do have in particular, I come from a medical family, right? So in particular, I think in doctors, there are very specific rules and regulations with HIPAA and things like that, right? Faxing and things like that, shockingly, is still a very typical way of communication. For right now, those industries have not found a way to replace that perfectly. And so you will see pockets where it is not yet happening. But what we're also finding is workarounds that customers really prefer. So by that, I mean workarounds that will say, okay, I can't complete an actual purchase online, but I would like to get my information online. If it fits with regulations, what can I compare online? So you see a lot of that. And then you also see this great desire for an inbound call center where somebody who answers the phone knows my account, knows what I bought, knows what my questions are, can answer my questions, and if they can't, can give me a warm handoff to someone who can immediately address my issue, right? We've all had frustrating experiences as consumers with call centers. And if you think about that, people carry that into their business relationships, and they're looking for very fast service, and they're really looking for the same kind of service that would be considered great on the consumer side.
Yeah, interesting. No, that makes sense. Hopefully, Ben, that helped.
All right, so why don't we press forward, and then, Gabe, you should help because I think we're running on the longer side. We can certainly wrap earlier, but would love to get some guidance. I know everyone has precious minutes in their work days.
Yeah, no, this is fantastic, Candace. I mean, I'd continue on, and if you feel like you need to drop, again, we wanted to answer your questions most of all here. So, Candace, I'd keep going, and if people need to drop at the half an hour mark, feel free, and we'll make sure we get you the recording.
Perfect. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about what customers care about. And let's start off by level setting a little bit. And this is a little bit of myth busting. You guys may know this already. This was a bit of a surprise to us. We did ask the question, what's the most destructive selling behavior that your manufacturer, supplier, sales force can engage in? And the punchline here is that your customers actually don't really want to see you that much anyway. We talked about how humans matter, and they do a lot. Customers, however, are very annoyed with too much contact from salespeople. So 32% of respondents listed this as their biggest issue. And that is almost 1.5 times over the next in the list, which is lack of product knowledge. That clocked in at around 23, 24%. And the question is why? Well, this actually makes sense with all that we've been hearing. So a lot of contact without enough substance at a time in the journey where I'd really rather go online and get my information, this actually makes sense, right? So if I want to have contact early on and you're just calling me and you have nothing new to say, this is not very helpful. So enough of what I would say salespeople or what customers don't want. Let's get a little bit to what they want. And in a nutshell, there are three things that they want: speed, transparency, and expertise, right? And these benefits are ones they want from a well-coordinated digital and human interaction. So the demand for speed is the result, as we had said earlier, of the consumerization of business buying behavior, right? So early in the journey, so you see the light blue areas that are highlighted here, customers want information quickly. And they want to get it online, they want to get it via an app, or when they can't get it that way, they want a human conversation that is going to be there and available quickly. So if they can contact a real person, if they can call them up and get an answer, that would be fantastic. Clear implications here for all of us as we think about inside sales. Web chat actually works fine for many, provided whoever's on the other end of the web chat really knows what they're talking about. When they do reach humans, though, they want a rapid turnaround time. So if it's a scenario where someone's going to call you back, it's got to be 24 hours or less, and they would prefer even less than that if possible. When you get into the actual purchase, which is sort of the medium blue color here, digital applications are really preferred if possible, right? Customers want shortcuts. They want the ability to make quick changes in an order, right? So very quick things, and they want the interface to mimic human interactions. So they would like the interface to be able to do things like, fix a mistake, change your address, very basic things. In some cases, even if there's a small spec, if there is something that looks different from a previous order, they would love that to be highlighted. And then finally, when you get to the post-purchase phase, here again, there was a preference for digital interactions for reordering. However, there is a real good opportunity here for humans to provide very quick, very smart answers. Which then takes us to the next issue around transparency. And so what we find here on transparency is that customers are really looking and really desiring to have things be open, right? So we know they want to compare items. They want to be able to not go to 16 different websites, download all the information, create a spreadsheet, and create their own mechanism for comparing. They want to be able to look across competitors, and they also want to be able to access RFPs, see where they are in terms of progress and moving through. You can also see that they get very annoyed when the price they were promised is not what ends up happening in the purchase. And then you'll also see after purchase, they want to be able to return things, right? So the consumer analogy here, and this holds also for B2B, if you have retail locations and you also have an online store, you want to be able to return wherever is most convenient, whether it's sending it back in an easy way or whether it is going to a location and saying, hey, I bought this online, can I return this? And this way someone can actually take care of them. And then the last thing, which is a bit of an extra credit point as far as I'm concerned, is if a supplier or a manufacturer can identify when there is an issue with an order, proactive information and notification about that is worth a lot, right? So you can even test and you'll see customers, if they hear that there's an issue with your order and we're addressing it and it's going to be a day late, there's a lot of credit given to the supplier in that scenario for identifying the problem early. And then the last thing that business buyers want is expertise. We touched on this when we were talking about speed and when we were saying your sales rep needs to call the right number of times with the right level of expertise and new information. Here is where the human touch really matters a lot. So if I can't get the information I need easily in a self-service way, how can I get it very quickly and accurately from a human? Here you don't see a ton of differentiation necessarily between face-to-face and inside sales. Where you do see it is if there's a demo involved. So can you do a demo online? Can you do a demo via a web app or screen sharing? There's a lot of high praise for customers there. The other thing that business buyers complain about is they say, hey, look, if there's something wrong with my order, nobody tells me, right? I get the wrong thing. Or I may be buying something and I'm buying two things and they're supposed to go together. They don't actually fit together. It would be great if somebody could actually inform me of what's happening. And then finally, on the follow-up, right? How can I actually manage my installation in a way that connects back to sales? If I call the sales rep, will they connect me with a person who's doing installation? Is the installation really slow if I have installation? And so on the expertise side, the whole idea here, and again, I think humans matter a lot, is how can we troubleshoot? How can we actually anticipate problems? How can we help you when you're ordering something that may or may not work? Oh,
Candace,
so yes.
a couple just, time's a little short, but I think this is an interesting question.
Yeah.
As we think about some of the things you just talked about, it does seem like there's a little bit of fuzziness around the definitions of transactional and relational salespeople in the eyes of the buyer because there's so much digitization going on. Do you feel like with this research that there is a little bit of a new definition of a sales rep forming?
Mm-hmm. I think that's an interesting question. What I would say is much of the transactional stuff will go towards self-serve or call center. So if I had a crystal ball, I would think that's the case. I don't think that will surprise anyone. I think in terms of the definition of this sales rep changing, I think there is increased pressure on sales reps to add value. And if they can add value, in terms of speed, transparency, and expertise, the question is where and how. And I think what we're seeing is a much higher premium placed on expertise in this case. So I think definitionally that will change. I think definitionally you'll see more consultative selling activities go to the humans. And, this, again, I think in a world of AI, you have bots, chatbots, and things like that getting smarter and smarter. They may be able to handle some of this. I don't think, however, that we're going to see wholesale replacement of humans where you're really talking about building relationships, building trust, providing very technical expertise, and also helping do things like, for example, I was sitting with an account manager once with a customer who was struggling with it was almost like what I would call a Rubik's Cube of options for products, slight differences in products, installation agreements, timing, some aftermarket service, right? So there are many different packages. And what the sales rep did using an app that helped compare things and build packages
Yeah.
was able to counsel and find out really what problem we're solving, how would you make trade-offs across them, and help the customer come very quickly to a decision.
Right. Interesting. Good. All right, we'll continue.
Okay. And so we'll wrap up now quickly, but I wanted to give you just a few examples on addressing speed, transparency, and expertise, and really talk about how you can use both humans and digital ways to address this, right? So the first one is a B2B retail company revamped its website with self-service pages, right? So this is like a very fancy version of FAQs to address pain points that were previously handled by customer service. So these were questions that came up again and again and again. And what they were able to do then is decrease the number of support calls that were more transactional. So Gabe, this is what you were talking about.
Yeah.
They were able to increase customer satisfaction, which was a surprise. And then the remaining support calls were reserved for the most complicated issues that required deep expertise to solve. A second example I'll give you just specific to transparency is this is a software as a service company. They set up a trial and buy site to target small and medium businesses. And they had follow-up sales and cross-sell taken care of by inside sales. The results here are pretty staggering, right? 600% compound annual growth rate for products that went through the site in 18 months. And even more surprising, 90% of these customers were new customers. So they were previously considered part of the unaddressable market. The last example I'll give is on expertise. This is a B2B semiconductor company, and they built an advanced analytics cross-sell engine. This was designed to make really targeted, very customer-specific product recommendations, and these were offered by inside sales. So these were existing companies who were already buying a product, and they were offered very specific, so this is like a classic next product to buy. 3 or 4% growth in a 0% growth market. So again, some pretty astounding results when there was the kind of combination of digital and human to get there. And then in the interest of time, I'm going to skip over the next two examples, and I'm just going to get to thinking about value. And what we've seen, we have several databases where we track both digital capabilities and digital execution for B2B companies. And what we find is getting this digital-human combination in the multi-channel world right can really generate a huge amount of value. So no matter how we slice and dice the data, it looks really good. And companies that have clear digital engagement strategies backed up by investments in humans, they outgrow their peers with lesser investments by almost 5 times, right? 8 times operating profit and a 2 times return to shareholders. So doubling down and really untangling how to solve this problem in your go-to-market model can be worth an incredible amount. And I'll just leave folks with some action items to think about. I like to think about what would I do on Monday based on this. And I would say the first one is to really think about how you deal with the customer need for speed, transparency, and expertise. How can you address this through inside sales, face-to-face, and digital? The other thing is planning for digital tools and channels as part of your regular customer interactions, I believe, is something that we all need to address. And then I think the last thing, and this may even be the most important, is to find out when and how your customers want to interact with you. Where does inside sales add the most value, right? This is a wonderful thing that you can test. It's not hard to do, and I would encourage a lot of this test and learn thinking that we see a lot of in the marketplace now.
Interesting. Well, Candace, really appreciate you taking the time. A lot of questions, a lot of good comments coming in from the audience. I know, as Candace said, a lot of you need to get back to your day job here. So we'll cut it off. I think we answered most of your questions. Feel free. You can see here Candace has put up her contact information. If you're open, Candace, I'm sure some people will reach out to you. Feel free to reach out to us here at InsideSales.com. We will be sending some stuff out post this recording and some other stuff so that you can see some of these pieces in more detail. Candace has written an article about this, etc. So Candace, again, thanks so much for joining. For the audience, thank you. Any final comments or summary statements, Candace?
I would just thank everyone for taking time out of their very busy days, and please do stay in touch. I'm happy to answer any questions ongoing. This is, I think, a fascinating topic with a lot of really important practical implications.
Fantastic. Well, again, everybody have a great day, and thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, Gabe.